Old School Bodybuilding Clothing Company. If you wish your fancy fitness center was a hardcore gym, you are old school. If you just ate chicken and rice and are about to eat chicken and rice, you are old school. OSBBC.com for the hardest training athletes.
Welcome back to the History of Bodybuilding. I'm here again with John Hansen, and we're going to be talking Lee Haney today. John, welcome. I understand you're undergoing a little hernia surgery tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow we're going to get it done, finally.
How long have you been battling with this hernia?
Well, I did it, I think, in 2012. It's right between my upper abs, so it doesn't bother me at all. It's just a cosmetic thing, so I'm just going to finally get it fixed.
Is it right above your belly button, or is it higher than that?
Higher than that. It's like right between the two upper abs.
Okay. You know, you see that a lot. I think what happens is that linea alba just breaks down over time in a lot of people, especially guys who work out regularly. I think it just keeps stretching, and eventually...
Yeah, actually, it happened when I was dieting. I think I was dieting for either a photo shoot or one of those contests I did in 2011, 2012, and I was squatting and I felt it. And when I dieted down that year, I could see it. You know, when you get rid of all that fat, you can see the little bump.
Yeah.
And eventually it's gotten a little bit bigger over the years. So they're going to do it by robotic surgery, where a robot's going to go in and put the mesh in and fix it.
It's pretty cool, the technology they have now. They can just kind of go in through like a little tiny incision. I always wonder if it's easier or if it's actually harder to use these robotics type surgeries, because the incision's a little smaller, but the time it takes to do the surgery, I don't even know if it's worth it. It's like it's crazy, but it's cool. What's the downtime on that?
I can't work out for 6 weeks.
Oh, you're gonna go out of your mind. What are you gonna do?
I know. I don't know. I think I might buy one of those things that bikini chicks wear.
Oh,
keep it real tight and maybe get away with doing some bands or something, you know.
You know, this is a true story. I had my umbilical hernia done, and probably in my entire life, I probably have had maybe one fight, and I don't even know if you can even call it a fight. It was just, I guess, no, I just never got into fights, you know. So I'm leaving. We left the surgery center, and because it was they do it that day. You leave, and I had a little bandage on my stomach and stuff like that where they did the surgery, and they said just take it easy, for a week or two, and and then you should be all right. I said okay. So I'm like, I got to stop at this is during my competitive years, so I had to stop at McDonald's because I used to eat McDonald's every day. My routine. I had to have my triple cheeseburgers and my fries, and I hadn't eaten anything since the night before because with surgery they don't let you eat. So we stop at McDonald's by my house, and some guy makes some like terrible remark or like really being an asshole to this is when I was dating Colette. She was driving my car, and he said something really obnoxiously nasty, like to the point I had to say something. So I get out of the car. She's like, "What are you doing? You just had surgery." I'm like, "Don't worry about it. We're gonna get into an argument. I'm not gonna fight this guy." So the guy is like obnoxious, like he's like screaming back at me. I'm like, who the hell do you think you are talking? Now I'm thinking, I'm getting a little aggravated. I just got out of surgery, okay?
Just got out of surgery.
So the guy is like getting in my face, and I was so mad that I took my finger and I poked him in the chest with it, like as hard as I could. And I know it hurt him because I got a big finger. And I said, he's like, "I'm gonna call the cops. You put your hand on me." I'm like, "What are you gonna say? I poked you? Get the hell out of here!" And luckily he ran. The guy. I must have hurt him with my finger. But so the one fight I ever get into, it was the day of surgery. So
wow, that's crazy.
Lesson be learned, John. Don't get into any skirmishes when you get out of surgery. So
I won't stop at McDonald's.
Yeah, don't stop at McDonald's on the way back. All right, let's get into it. Today's show is going to be about Lee Haney and the history of Lee Haney, and where he came from. Some of the controversy of him coming up, some of the people that a lot of people don't even realize that he lost to along the way, and a lot of the people he beat, because he beat a lot more than he lost to. So first of all, where did Lee Haney come from? Where was he born? And what was the first bodybuilding show that you could remember, at least, that he actually competed in?
He was born in Spartanburg, South Carolina in 1959. So
Wow.
he just celebrated his 61st birthday last week.
I saw that.
He was born on November 11th. And the first contest I remember Lee winning was the 1979 Teenage Mr. America.
Wow.
And he actually looked like a man. I remember when I saw the pictures in Iron Man magazine, I was like, wow, this guy, he had a great physique, but his face, I thought he looked much older than a teenager. You know, he looked very mature.
Lee Haney looked like he did now, like when he was 17. It's like his face has never changed, you know.
Right. But back then, they had a great lineup at the Teenage Mr. America. It was incredible. I mean, every class was full of really good bodybuilders. That's how all the teenage shows were back then. And Lee won, and it was a very big win because, you know, if you look back at the history of the sport, guys like Boyer Coe, Dennis Tenorino, all those guys won the Teenage Mr. America before they won America. So it was kind of a stepping stone to the national spotlight. Was
there anyone in that show that Lee beat that went on to become a good bodybuilder?
Well, Phil Williams was in it. Okay. Phil went on to win the 1985 MTC Nationals. I think Phil had actually beaten Lee at a local contest in Georgia, and like about 3 months before that. And I interviewed Phil, and he said when they showed up for the Teenage Mr. America, he saw Lee Haney. He's like, what the hell did this guy do in the last 3 months? Because he changed so much in 3 months.
Lee probably had no idea what he was doing at his first show. He probably was eating like, you know, ice cream sundaes, you know, to carve up, you know.
But there was some other bodybuilders. I don't know if any of them went on to, like Frank Pantoja. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He sort of looked like he was a Rory Liedlmeyer protege, kind of along with Frank Zane type of look. Mm-hmm. There was a real big guy from New York, Andy Lopadotti.
I remember Andy, yeah.
Yeah, he was in it. He was a real big guy.
He was a freak, Andy.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot isn't the controversy that Andy should have beat Haney at the Teenage America? I thought that was what everyone was saying. At least all the New Yorkers say that.
Yeah, probably. He was a big guy. I'm sure he was even bigger than Lee at the time. So
a lot of people felt that Haney should have lost to Lopadotti. Or that at least Greg Valentino likes to say that. That's one of Greg Valentino's, you know, guys.
Yeah. But after that, Lee took, well, actually the very next year when he was 20 years old, he went into the Mr. USA contest, the Mr. USA. Right. And I remember that contest because a guy named Dave Rogers won, and Lee was in the heavyweight class, and Lee took fourth at 20 years old. But they made a mention of him in Iron Man magazine that he was the heaviest guy in the whole contest at 20 years old.
And what was that? How much did he weigh?
I think he was 220 something, maybe 227 or something.
Isn't that crazy, John, when you think back that that was the heaviest guy in the whole show back then? Now, if you're 220, you're like a joke, you know?
Right, I know, yeah. Yeah, don't quote me on that, but I think he was like in the high 220s, maybe low 230s. But he was the biggest guy in the whole show, and he was in fourth place. He was 20 years old. And then after that, Lee had a cyst on his wrist, and he had to take a year off. And he came back at 22, and that was his big year. That's when he won the Nationals and the Universe.
Did he win the Junior Nationals first, I believe, right?
Yeah, he won the first Junior Nationals in 1982. And he also won a contest, I think called the Mr. Atlantic USA or something, where he beat out Tony, the guy who was on the commercials.
Oh, Tony Little, right.
Tony Little, yeah. He beat Tony Little. And then after that, he won the Junior Nationals, and then he won the Nationals, and then he won the Universe, all in 1 year.
That's crazy. Well, back then, when you won the Nationals, that didn't give you a pro card, right? You had to go to the World Amateur Championships, which was called the Mr. Universe, and you had to win that over in Europe, right?
Yeah. So that makes sense. I mean, you're the best amateur in the world, because if you win the Universe, you're beating all the top amateurs in the world, and then you've gone as far as you can go as an amateur, so then you can turn professional. And Lee beat out Ralph Mueller, and he also beat out a really big guy, Gunnar Rosbo from, what was Gunnar from? Belgium or something? He was from somewhere in Europe. He was a monster.
Right.
And so Lee beat both of those guys.
Contrast that with the fact that at this weekend's NPC Nationals in Florida, they're giving out 90 pro cards.
Right.
Now, obviously, it's multiple classes too, but two pro cards per weight class in bodybuilding. So
yeah.
That's a
Well,
lot
at
of
the
pro
Nationals
cards.
that year, a guy named Moses Maldonado, who I'm sure you remember, he was from the East Coast.
Sure.
He won the light heavyweight class. He went over to the university. He took second. So he did not win.
Wow.
And he had to try to come back to get on that next universe team. And he never got his pro card. Moses never got his pro card.
Wow.
Because you really had to win that universe the first time you went, because you never knew if you were going to make it back again. You never knew what was going to happen.
I can't remember what year was it that they finally started giving out pro cards to the Nationals winners without going to the Worlds.
I think it was right around the time they started drug testing the Nationals. So that was 86, because Mike Ashley won the universe in 86.
Right.
He had taken second to Tom Terwilliger that year. And they gave Tom a pro card, and they gave Gary Stridham a pro card. So it was probably, I think it was 86.
Interesting. Okay. So Haney wins the Nationals. Obviously, everyone is like, this guy's going to be the next big thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, what was the first Olympia he entered? 83?
Yeah, he did the Olympia the very next year in 1983. Before that, he went into the Pro World Championships, which was won by Muhammad Makaway, and that was held in Atlantic City. And Greg DeFaro was second, and Lee was in third place.
Right.
So Lee got beat by both McAway and Greg DeFaro. And then a couple months later, Lee went into the Night of the Champions, and he beat Greg DeFaro, and McAway wasn't in it. So
Right.
Lee won his very first pro show at the Night of the Champions.
Interesting. Yeah. And then it seemed like the Night of Champions was always the launch pad for you went to Night of Champions, you won that, and you did Olympia,
Yeah, usually the guys who won the Nationals would go into the Night of the Champions the next year, and most of the time they would win.
Right.
Gary Stridham won, Vince Taylor won. Sure, a few other guys who, a lot of those guys who won the Nationals or the Universe would go right into the Night of the Champions.
Lavroni did that,
Lee
Mike
Labrada.
Francois, the Labrada, What? So Haney shows up at the '83 Olympia. Talk us through that show. Obviously,
so
Samir won that year.
Yeah, he goes in at about 230 pounds, and Samir won. McAway was second. Lee Haney got third, which was a really great debut, and he beat out Frank Zane, who got fourth. That was Frank Zane's last Mr. Olympia. And Bertil Fox was fifth, which was really controversial because Bertil Fox looked incredible that year.
Right.
And the crowd at Munich, Germany went nuts for him.
Really?
And Joseph Wilcox was sixth. So he had a really good debut, taking third place and beating out Frank Zane.
Was the talk at the time, because I know you read all the magazines, that was a little before my time, was the talk like that Haney was going to be the next Mr. Olympia? Did people predict him the following year, or did they think like in the future he was going to be like the next Mr. Olympia?
Yeah, I think everybody thought in the future this guy is probably going to be Mr. Olympia because he was a real big guy. He was 230, and Samir was probably under 200 pounds that year.
Sure.
McAway was 5'2", 150 pounds, so he was small. Zane wasn't big. So for a guy being 5'11", 230, that was a big guy. And he had great shape. He had that small waist. He had really good symmetry. And he was a young guy. He was only, let's see, how old was he? I think it was 24 or 23.
Yeah.
23 at the time. So.
Yeah. Even though he looked like he was 35.
Yeah. And
But
then
the great thing is
had
he still looks like he's 35. That's the great thing, even at 61.
Right. That's true. But right after the Olympia, they had the Grand Prix Tour.
Yeah.
So they had like 3 or 4 shows. The very first one, Lee actually got third place behind McAway and behind Bertil Fox. Bertil Fox beat him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then the next one, I think Bertil might have dropped out or he dropped down. And McAway won them all. McAway won each one. But Lee got better each one. And by the time they got to the last one, which I think was in London, Lee was really good. He was way more ripped, and he was getting bigger and more ripped each show. And McAway beat him, and that was the one, I don't know if you ever saw the pictures, where he picked McAway up. And he
Maybe we could find that picture,
Yeah. So I thought that was a great move. I even told Lee that. It made him look like a winner even when he lost.
Right.
He picked up McAway. It was a good sport. And then the next year he won. So.
That's like a Cedric McMillan move. I could see Cedric doing that, right? Picking up one of the shorter guys.
Well, who else did it was Arnold. When Arnold lost to Sergio,
Right.
I don't know if you ever saw the pictures of this. He hugged him and he kissed him on the cheek.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, he gave him like the
next
Godfather
year-
kiss, like, you'll never beat me again type of thing,
Right. But the next year he did win. The next year
Yeah.
Arnold did beat Sergio.
Yeah.
So I think it maybe makes a good impression with the judges when you show that you're a good sport.
Yeah, I think it's important to do that.
Yeah.
So Haney now has the whole year now to kind of prepare, right? For the 84
So-
Olympia.
When I talked to Lee, he told me an interesting story. He said he was training for the 83 Olympia, and he was at World's Gym, and Arnold came up and looked at him, and he said he was over 240 pounds ripped, and he had like 5-6 weeks left to go to the contest.
Right.
And Arnold asked him, he goes, how are you going to hold this condition for the next month and a half? And Lee didn't really have an answer. So by the time they got to the contest, Lee was down to 230. He lost like 10 pounds.
He over-dieted is what you're saying.
He over-dieted. He was probably overtraining, probably training twice a day.
Yeah.
So the next year, when he went in at 1984, he weighed 243.
Wow.
Which he said was the same weight he was when he was at World's Gym and he was ready for the show. So he really didn't really get much bigger. He just didn't lose the muscle this time.
Dorian Yates said the same thing. In 92, he said, he over-dieted, when he went against Haney for the last Olympia that Haney did, and Haney just narrowly beat him. He said, I probably could have been 15 pounds heavier, or more.
Yeah.
And so when he came in 90, when he won the Olympia in, what was it, 92?
Yeah.
He was a lot bigger. And then in 93, he was even bigger because he said, I really didn't put that much more size and I just wasn't depleting down as much and over-dieting, So I think a lot of
what
guys
happened with Dorian was he could have been bigger for 92, which was his first year.
Yeah.
But he knew Haney was out. So he knew his big competition would come from Lee Labrada, Sean Ray, the smaller guys.
Yeah.
So he knew he had to get as ripped as possible. And like you said, he over-dieted. And the next year he didn't over-diet. He was 15 pounds heavier.
Yeah. So I mean I think that's what we call amateur mistakes, or and that you learn that with time. What works best for your body. But I think we all are guilty of that as bodybuilders, of overdoing it sometimes because we want to be so good that we think more is better.
Yeah.
I did that in 96. I'd come off 95 junior nationals. I had won the heavyweight class at 258. And when I dieted for the 96 USA, I was actually living in California for about 14 days before the show. And I was going to the gym 3 times a day because I didn't have anything else to do. I was getting up at like 5 in the morning. I was starving to death. I don't know why I was in shape 6 weeks out. I was ready at probably 268, or something like that. Or 268, around there. And I wound up coming into that show to like 252 or something like that weighing in. It was just too small. I over-dieted because I was undoing too much cardio. I didn't even need to do it, But you think that the more you do, the better you're going to look, and it's not the case.
Yeah. And 84 also was the year that Haney trained with Gaspari. They trained together for the first time.
Right.
And Gaspari had a great year that year, too. He won his class at the Nationals, and then he won his class at the Universe, and then he got his pro card. But I don't think Lee ever expected Gaspari to be such a big rival in the future, when they were training together.
The funny thing was, though, I don't even think that Gaspari was ever really a rival to Haney. I mean, because Haney was so far above everyone else that probably Haney made Gaspari train harder and push harder, so he was better. And then Richie trained so hard that Haney probably trained harder than he normally would have, just because he wanted to keep up with Richie. So they were actually good for each other in a sense.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
I don't think that Gaspari had the genetics to ever beat Haney, and I think he knew that. He just knew he had to be more ripped than Haney,
Right. Yeah.
So what would you say of all? I mean, then obviously Lee went on to win 8 Olympias in a row. When we look back at all the Olympias that he won, give me the ones where you think he was his best, and the ones where he a lot of people felt he wasn't, and he could have actually lost.
Well, I think the first one that he won was really a great victory, and that was a great contest because you had a lot of people in that contest. Of course, you had the return of Sergio Oliva in that show, so that was a big event. It was held in New York for the first time, I think, in 10 years. The last time it was held in New York was 74. So, this was 84, so it was 10 years. So
1984,
that was a really,
Mr. Olympia.
really big show.
Yeah.
And that was a really great win for Haney. I thought he looked fantastic in that one. And then, of course, his last one in 91, I think that was probably his best Mr. Olympia ever, was his last one.
Best conditioning, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Haney never had like strided glutes and craziness like that.
No. Mm-hmm.
But he knew that Dorian was not going to be a walkover. And I think he knew that he possibly could lose to Dorian. I think that made him train harder for that show.
Yeah. Another thing, too, is he was coming off that 1990 Olympia, which they drug tested. And maybe he responded better.
Yeah.
I don't know.
He was probably the only natural guy on stage. That's the funny thing.
Right.
Now, that's the year that they say Labrada should have won, right? Do you agree with that?
No. I was there at the show. It was in Chicago. Haney was definitely off. He was smaller. But compared to Labrada, I think he still was better than him.
Yeah.
I thought the two guys that were in the best shape in that contest were Mike Christian and Sean Ray. Those guys were in fantastic shape. Now, I don't know if they could have won the show, but I thought they were actually better than Labrada, to be honest.
So why do you think Labrada placed so high in that show?
Well, he was in great shape, and he was really close the year before. In '89, he was a very close second. But I thought, as far as size, conditioning, I thought Mike Christian was the best he ever looked.
Right.
In 1990. So it was hard to believe he was clean. He said he was, but he looked amazing. He only got fourth, so I think they kind of screwed him on that.
Yeah.
Sean Ray, I thought, looked just as good as he did at the Arnold Classic earlier in the year when he failed the test, and he looked just as good at the Olympia, and he got third. But I thought both of those guys could have been ahead of Labrada. But when you're comparing, in my opinion, when you compare Labrada to Haney, I just think Haney overall was just bigger, had the structure, and even though he was off, I thought he was still, close enough where he could have won.
The thing about Haney was he was so much bigger than everyone else, which is funny when we say that because he wasn't really that big compared to guys today. And obviously his structure made him look even bigger. I imagine it had to be hard for him to, because I don't think did he really increase his stage weight very much over the course of that 8-year run?
No, actually, the first year he won, he was 243. The next year, in 1985, he was actually 2 pounds lighter.
Mm-hmm.
Because he felt like his waist needed to get a little tighter. He needed more intercostals, abdominals. So he came in a little bit lighter, which is something that Frank Zane did from his first win to his second win.
Right.
So he was smart that he knew that he was already the biggest guy. He didn't need to get bigger. I think in 1989, when it was in Italy, he was over 250.
Oh, he was? Okay.
Yeah, so that was the biggest he ever was. But there was some controversy. A lot of people thought Labrada could have beat him because Labrada was really good that year. And Haney was a little bit off. But again, I think, when you're comparing Labrada to Haney, Haney's just such a big guy.
Now,
but, it's interesting to say that, Dave, because the way they used to do the Mr. Olympia, and they don't do it anymore like this, but I was at several Mr. Olympias during those eras, they would start off the show where all the guys would walk out in a single line. So if you had like 16 guys in the Mr. Olympia, they would just all come out. They wouldn't introduce them or anything. They would just all come out in a single line, and the crowd would go nuts.
Right.
And they would start looking, at the lineup to see who was the best. And Haney won the show right walking out because he was 5'11", so he was taller than most of the guys. And he was so wide, and he had that small waist.
Yeah.
They all came out, and it was like the show was over.
What year was it when he was his biggest that year? You just mentioned. What was that, 1989, you said?
89.
No one ever, I think, for some reason people are afraid to ask, I think, Lee Haney, but I don't think anyone's ever asked Lee Haney, like, what drugs he took, for these shows. But around 1990s when growth hormone really hit the scene, I wonder if that had something to do with all of a sudden, his body weight went from being steady and all of a sudden, boom, it kind of went up in that year. And then, he was bigger at that point because there was no GH really to talk about before that,
I don't know. You think he did it? He didn't have any of the stomach distension or anything.
Well, I don't think he did it for very long. He probably didn't do very much of it. I don't think that Lee Haney used a lot of drugs. I don't think he needed it. I think if he would have used the dosages the guy used today, he probably would have been 290 on stage.
Yeah.
With his genetics,
Yeah, I mean, if you look at him from like 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, he was pretty much the same. Maybe just that year he was deciding, I'll come in a little bit bigger and just see how it goes, and just see what happens.
Yeah, but I think when Lee Haney decided to come in bigger, it meant that he was going to train harder in the gym. It wasn't like, I'm going to go back and use some more drugs. That wasn't even like, I'm going to take another protein shake. That was like Haney's, way of getting bigger. So I think that, his body he's just a genetic freak. Probably he never really, if people saw his cycles, I bet they would think they were a joke. I really believe that.
Well, it's interesting too. He was really the first guy since Arnold to dominate the sport, because if you look after Arnold, Franco won it once, and then Zane won it 3 times, and then Dickerson won, and Samir won. So nobody was really dominating the sport, and we didn't really have a big guy like Arnold.
Right.
So Lee was the first guy since Arnold to come along and dominate and be that big dominating Mr. Olympia winner. And Arnold only won 6 times in a row, and then he won one, 5 years later in 1980.
Right.
But Lee won 8 in a row, so that was really an incredible accomplishment when you look back at it. And he really won pretty convincingly every one, except for his last one, where he had that real challenge from Dorian in 91.
Had Haney gone another year, 92, you think he would have beaten Dorian again?
I don't know. Because Dorian did have him in the legs, especially from the back. Dorian had those hard glutes. He had those big calves, the hamstrings.
Yeah.
It would have been tough. I think he was real smart quitting when he did.
You know what? I believe that Haney would have won one more year, because I think Dorian was and Dorian by his own admission was so nervous about not being hard enough. I don't think that Dorian was really exploiting his true potential, which was his size advantage. Because I think the only way to beat Haney would have been to outsize him, and I think he was sucking down so much that he wasn't really getting the advantage over Haney like he should have gotten. And Haney, of course, had a better structure than, I don't think anyone had a better structure than Haney. So even though Dorian might have had better calves and stuff like that, I think Haney, still was close enough to him. And if Haney would have made gained a couple more pounds, because Haney was still young, right? How old was he when he retired? 33?
No, older than that. Let me see. Yeah, maybe 33.
I think he was 33. So he still was probably growing, because. So I think Haney could have won another year. I don't think that Haney would have beaten Dorian in 93, but I think in 92 he could have.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, if you look at Dorian and Lee stand side by side in 91, he did have that much smaller waist and he had a much bigger chest.
Yeah.
Dorian didn't have the big chest.
No, but Dorian had the lats and everything like that, and the leg separation. I would have loved to seen it one more time. I think that the fans would have gone crazy for that.
Yeah.
But
it was in Finland. It was I don't know. I think he did the right thing quitting in Atlanta. When he did. I
think Haney had nothing more to prove at this point. 8 Olympias. So he had his own gym and he had a lot of businesses and stuff like that. He didn't really have to be concerned. I think didn't he have real estate too? I interviewed him about that. He had bought a lot of real estate too.
Sean Ray said he bought some land. So
he bought land. I think the government wound up buying it back from him to build an airport or something like that.
Yeah.
So he did well for himself, Lee. Lee was a good businessman, and I guess he's one of the guys that escaped from the sport with no health ramifications, no negative health ramifications, because I don't think he ever pushed the envelope, to be honest with you.
No, I don't either. And he never got injured either. I can't remember ever hearing about any injuries during that 8-year run.
Because he stimulated, he didn't annihilate, and that's the key, right? That's the famous Lee Haney saying that I always use on everyone.
He was a great Mr. Olympia. He's just the way he conducted himself. Yeah. He was a classy guy.
Yeah.
A real gentleman, and he was like that then. He's still like that today, of course. So, I mean, he was a great example of the way to be a real great champion. And I think he was then, and he's still a great example of how to be a great bodybuilder and a great person.
You said it. He's a good example of how to be a great person. He's got balance in his life. He had family. He cares about people. And I think that more people should look up to him and emulate him. He might not have been the greatest Mr. Olympia of all time, but he might have been the greatest person to win the Mr. Olympia.
Yeah.
And I like I said, there's not a nicer guy that I've ever met in our industry who's, when I see him interact with people, he's nice to everyone. I've never seen him be nasty. He doesn't condescendingly talk to people. He speaks to people like he's on the same level as them, and I think that's what makes him such a great champion.
Yeah. Do you remember when he won that last one, Dave, in '91? How everybody just rushed over to congratulate him? I mean, when do you see that? How often do you see that? Is that going to happen to Phil Heath if he beats Tucker this year?
I don't know. Unfortunately, there won't be anyone to even be able to watch the show because of this whole COVID thing. So
yeah, I know.
But it will be interesting to see if Phil Heath can tie Ronnie Coleman and Lee Haney this coming December at the Olympia, wherever that may be held. I don't know. Right now, it's in Vegas still. You never know. It's with this COVID year, anything's possible at this point.
Right.
All right, well, John, good luck on your surgery tomorrow, and you'll keep us updated on that. And obviously, that's an elective surgery, so hopefully, you'll get out of that unscathed. Hernia surgery is weird because you're kind of not really in pain, but you have to, you really can't do anything because you don't want to re-rupture the hernia.
Right.
So I just know you're gonna go completely out of your mind. You better find like a little hobby for the next 6 weeks to kind of keep you mellowed out, so to speak.
Yeah, they said I could go for walks, but of course it's not the same as.
I wouldn't be doing. I would just the first week I wouldn't do anything, to be honest with you. I would just chill.
Yeah.
Catch up on. Have you? You know what? I wanted to bring up to you. I'm glad I thought of this. You posted on your Facebook the other day, and I saw it about Queen's Gambit, which is a Netflix original series. I loved it. It's about a chess prodigy girl, from the '60s, early '70s. I loved it. I'm completely on board with you. I thought it was one of the best miniseries I've ever seen.
Yeah, me too. I agree. I think in the last 10 years, it's one of the best ones I've ever seen. That girl was fantastic.
Excellent.
The writing, the directing was amazing. I love how they put the chessboard on the ceiling. How she was seeing that, from taking the drugs and stuff.
It's amazing. If you guys haven't seen it, it's called The Queen's Gambit. And I don't know if you're aware of this. My dad taught me to play chess when I was 4 years old. And he was into going to all the chess clubs back in the 70s. That's when chess was huge with Bobby Fischer.
Yeah.
And he used to bring me to the library, and where they used to have the chess clubs on Long Island, and I used to beat the adults. I was like his little prodigy. The problem was that I was into sports, and as I hit a certain age, I just, I still played, but I didn't give it the attention that it needed to really be the best. It came too easy to me. It was what it was. So I kind of just took it for granted. But yeah, I mean, it's a whole little subculture that was really, really big in the 70s. And I think it's pretty big nowadays because, everyone plays chess online now.
Yeah.
Chess.com is huge.
It's a sports movie. I knew nothing about chess. I know nothing about chess, but I got so into that show because it was so intense. It was like a sports movie.
I'm surprised that you don't play chess because it's a great game, and that's something I could see you totally getting into too,
Yeah, I got it. I'm gonna try and get into it.
You got to go on chess.com. You take the tutorials and learn the game, and it's a lot of strategy, But like I said, it's really a game for young people because you could just block out. There's no reality. All you're worried about is that. When you have a million things going on in your life, it's distracting because when you're playing the game, you start thinking about things you shouldn't be thinking about. You should only be thinking about chess, and so it's good for people who have tunnel vision. They do very well at that game.
Sort of. It's kind of meditative then, huh?
Yeah, it's literally. I mean, think about it. I mean, she described it really well. It's the main character of the movie. It's she felt like she had no control over her life, but the chessboard is so many squares, and in that universe, she's the master of that universe. And so when you know all the squares and all the moves of all the pieces, it's like you feel like you have control of your life in a sense. And that was the metaphor that she kind of relayed. And for a lot of people, that's that's their whole world. It's like the chess world. And it's the strategy is unbelievable when they break down the nuances. Another thing is if you have a photographic memory, you do better at chess too because you can remember all the moves in your head. I kind of play by instinct. In other words, I just had good instincts because I was playing for so long. But when you get to that upper echelon, the top players know they could play 16 moves ahead in their mind, and they know, all right, if I move here, this guy's going to move here, and he's going to move here, and I'm going to move there, and he's going to move. Not many people can do that. That's a gift. Yeah. That's what the true chess prodigies have over everyone else. But guys, check it out, The Queen's Gambit. John, thanks for joining us. Good luck tomorrow. And that's going to take us to the end of another episode of RX Muscles. history of the sport. I'm Dave Palumbo. We'll see you next time.